Well, I think reflection of the game on Saturday probably held fairly true with how we felt after the game. Opportunities for us to stay in that game, opportunities to make the progression, I guess, of that game look a little bit different, but things that we didn't take advantage of. But certainly credit to Oregon State. They were and are going to be, I think, a team to be reckoned with this season. So we need to move on. We need to, I think, look at the errors that we made, whether that's in our plan, our preparation, or even just our execution on Saturday, and make those corrections, and recognize that we're 3 games in. We got Big Sky play starting, and we need to make those changes, we need to make those improvements, I guess, as much as anything immediately as we go back on the road to Eastern Washington, who has an extra week on us, and obviously a place that for many has been really tough to play. Back-to-back years going there, I think, does serve us well. The fact that most of these guys played there last year and we had success, but that doesn't guarantee us anything. So big week to respond and turn the page, and I think our guys are up to the challenges we got going this morning.
Other than execution, was there anything that stuck out when you looked at game film yesterday?
No, I think we felt like our effort was there. I just think there was opportunities within that game, in particular, probably third down play both ways. Certainly special teams that. If a few of those plays look a little bit differently, I mean, the margin wasn't going to be what it was. And if you can get that game in the second half where the margin is attainable, it would be different. So felt our guys, ultimately they played hard and, stayed in the fight, but by no means did we play well enough. And certainly some of that credit does go to Oregon State, but I do think there's things that we can correct. And personnel-wise, I think we always have to have that sense of we can put another guy out there, and I don't think there's anything super drastic there that wholesale changes are going to be made by any stretch. But I think we have to look at that, and we'll do that through the course of this week.
On defense, how much do you think it was kind of a zone versus man-to-man thing that maybe caused some of the issues, especially in the passing game?
Well, I think it's a combination of we didn't get enough pressure, and that's they got a good offensive line. We didn't get enough pressure with 4, so he had time to sit back there, and whether we were rushing 4 playing zone or soft man, it probably didn't look that different. I think when we were playing man, we weren't real aggressive. There was a few times the ball was in the air that we were able to make a play on the ball, but ultimately a lot of it was keeping things in front of us in both man and zone calls. So I think it's a combination of all of that. And when we pressured, they did a pretty good job of picking it up. And I know broke contain a couple times with scrambles in their quarterback. We allowed their quarterback to feel pretty comfortable, I guess. Ultimately, whether that is what we were doing up front or what we were doing in the back end, I think it was a combination.
Talking to Marquis, he said last week before that Oregon State game, he maybe saw that there were some execution issues in practice, and it played out on Saturday. How was the overall? What was the team like today? Are they on a new leaf today? Is there just a different mindset, or is anything carrying over?
Well, I think going back to the first part of your question, I think that's what practice is for. I think you work through things in practice, and I think as coaches, you determine how that plays out on Saturdays. So an observation by Marquis, but I think ultimately we went after it last week in practice, and it didn't play out in the game. I think our guys watched the film this morning. Really asked them to not only see what they did wrong, but then why they maybe did this or this wrong, this or that wrong, I should say, and went out there with a good attitude this morning, and that's all you can ask. I mean, it's in the game of football, you have to be able to turn the page, whether you win or lose, and each week's its own week. Each opponent's brings its different set of both opportunities and challenges, and but you gotta be able to own the previous performance, and I think we've done that, and that was what a lot of this morning was about.
One
Early
thing.
in the week, but Eastern Washington coming up, what stands out to you about them?
Well, offensively, they got a lot of new players. I think, the change for them at quarterback is monumental. I think they lost I don't know if you say a generational player, but obviously he was the player of the year in our division, and he really made them go for a long time. In 2 games in, Talkington's the player of the week in the conference one week, and then the other week's against Oregon. I think in the Oregon game, or the Tennessee State game, he showed that he's elusive. He can extend plays. He can make plays with his feet. I mean, he had over 400 yards of total offense in that game. But he's still relatively inexperienced. So, we have to put pressure on him to make those plays. I think receiver-wise, they still have playmakers, even though they lost a couple really good playmakers. They still got a couple really good offensive linemen. I think defensively, tale of 2 games for them too, I think, based on their opponents, but I think they can get they can make things complicated up front. Jerome in particular, interior wise, is a good player. It was last year, and they returned some others as well. So I think I do think you can look at where they were last year and see schemes and familiarities, but there's a lot of different players on both sides, and looking at their 2 games this year certainly isn't this whole holistic look at them. It's two games. One they found a way to win, and one against a really good opponent in Oregon, and I think we far from seeing what this team is capable of, I guess is probably what I'm saying, and we gotta expect them to be very prepared with the extra week, and expect obviously their best shot.
One thing you mentioned after Saturday's game was that you didn't want to lose to this team twice. So I guess my question is, since this is a Big Sky opener, I guess does it have a greater emphasis, to I guess get back on the right foot this week, even coming off a loss like that?
Well, my point to that is if you don't get out of the feeling sorry for yourself mode, or not figuring out a way to get prepared, that's when you don't go into that next game ready. And I think the fact that it is another road challenge, it's the Big Sky opener against a really tough opponent. I hope human nature plays a role in it more, as much as just our ability. We got to turn the page. I think it probably does help that it is Big Sky opener. It is, we are playing at Eastern Washington. I think both those factors should help us, and I think it's already occurred. We asked the guys to, watch the film and learn from it and move on. And as far as I could tell this morning, we did that.
We asked a little bit about after the game, but I'm curious. I don't think Garrett appeared, and Elijah had limited carries. What kind of were the main reasons, I guess, for that?
Well, I think the nature of our first half offensively was, okay, we have a really long, sustained, actually long, but a sustained drive that scores. We did things a bunch of different ways that first drive. We come out, we throw an interception our first play of our next drive, and we return a kick. I think ultimately we had 17 plays in the first half. So, and at that point you're down 20. So, establishing much of anything from a traditional running back oriented game plan at that point, unfortunately there probably wasn't a lot of time for him, and then we were 3 and out our first possession of the second half. Then they return a punt. Now we're down, even more, 26 at that point. So I think there was going to be a part of it. It wasn't going to be all of it by any means. Running the ball with our quarterbacks and our receivers was going to be a part of it, and it just so happened running with our quarterbacks, given what the situation lent itself to, probably just ended up being a little bit bigger portion than we anticipated going in.
And I think talking with Taylor, he said, and you've said this too, getting your best 11 guys out there is important, and then obviously being limited at that position. How much of those, I guess, play into some of that as well?
Well, I think it's certainly playing into our personnel looking a little bit, untraditional, I guess. I think that's fair, and I do think in our two quarterbacks, I would say those two are our best runners right now. I think that's the truth. So how much can we tax them? And the fact that we have two of them, does that help? Yes. We have to find a traditional running back presence to some degree. I was, disappointed. Our receivers had 3 carries and it was for -6 yards. I mean, that was not what the plan was. The three plays that went to them, I think a couple of them were good calls by the defense, and then there was additionally some plays where the quarterbacks kept it that they could have gotten it that probably could have looked a little bit differently had the receivers gotten the ball in those situations. So, no, we're going to look, I think, a little bit different than the norm would say, I guess, and that's just the reality of it right now. We will get Lane back sooner than later. We will get Isaiah back eventually, and until that time, we got to figure out how to get it done.
And speaking of that, I mean, it didn't look like you suffered any major injuries. I guess, is there any update on that, and then anybody who might be on the mend?
We came out of it healthy. I know McCade O'Reilly went down, kept playing on the first kickoff, made the play, actually lost his helmet, made a play on the ball. So I think he has potential, he'll be out for a little while. And otherwise, Kendrick Bailey did not make the trip. He'll be back as a backup in the secondary. But I think that's our only real changes.
Any more specific update on Lane? Could we see him back this week or no?
Won't be. He could get back on the practice field this week. I don't think that'll have him game ready necessarily. We're just about to 2 weeks out now, and it was probably going to be at least 2 to 3 weeks. So he's pushing it. It wasn't as severe as it might have been, I guess. So my hope is that we get him back for that next game right now.
You mentioned kind of Talkington earlier, the new quarterback at Eastern Washington. I guess what differences do you kind of see between him and Eric Berrier?
Well, I think they're neither is tall in stature. They're both athletic, but the difference is the wealth of experience that Berrier had at the end of it. And the wealth of experience coupled with a multitude of confidence that he played with, and then the confidence that they had in him. I think, that's the team, the coaches. He was in position to make whatever play that seemed possible, and that's with a quarterback, and that trust in the quarterback, and that willingness to give, a quarterback all that free reign. That takes some time. And 2 games in, I'm sure they want Talkington to catch up to that as fast as possible, but that's hard. That's so he's taken over an offense that was really directed by one guy with really good skill players though too. I mean, they had really good skill players last year. Not that they returned Roberson and Chisholm, and they got some guys, but those 2 tall receivers that they lost, Limu Jones and Boston. They were hard to handle running back. So it's definitely just not on just comparing these 2 quarterbacks. It's them trying to bring this offense along, which I trust that they will, and I trust that they'll look differently, 2 weeks removed from that Oregon game than they did that Saturday. So that's what we got to prepare for.
And this is kind of similar to my earlier question, but not even just specifically the Oregon State game, but just shifting from non-con to Big Sky play. Is there a different mindset, different approach kind of to this?
Well, like I've talked about, we can't be this team that rides this wave of okay, this game's more important than this game. I think those teams that think that way set themselves up for failure. you might be able to ride high when you're riding high, but when you're not, you don't have that same thought process. What's that look like? And I think the teams in our league are too good to think we can ride that roller coaster. So yes, are the games seemingly more important as they move along? I suppose that's the nature of a football schedule and stacking up games. But you know, the approach we have to take, that this is the opponent we play, and you know, these are the stakes. This is where it's going to be played, and you know, prepare like crazy no matter who it is.
I guess it's just with Marquis. First of all, just you know, having back-to-back weeks now with returns, first time in years. Is that something? I mean, I guess how much do you guys kind of expect to see that kind of dynamic return?
Well, I think coming into the season, we felt good about, and I think I spoke to that. Just returner was a struggle for us last year, making big plays back there, whether it was punt or kickoff return. We struggled in you know, settling on Marquis and Taco to return kicks and punts. We felt really good about their ability, and you know, schematically it still takes you know, 10 guys in front of you doing their jobs, and I think we feel good about you know, where we're at with that crew. But ultimately, it takes a guy back there that can see it and hit it, and I think you saw that with both those guys in different forms. You know, return of punts and return of kicks are two different things, and you know, Marquis, I think he's going to be a big weapon for us. We thought he was going to be a big weapon, and that proved, you know, against I think a really good team, you know, that takes their special teams very seriously. And so, you know, do we expect returns every game? I don't know, but I think we have that threat now, and you know, our guys have confidence in them both those guys back there, and I think that matters as well.
Did Marquis play in running back in high school? Did that make him kind of one of the top candidates to also line up there after all those guys went down?
Well, I think having that background helps. I think you watch him run a couple plays in that Moorhead game where he could kind of speed up and slow down, change his pace, but then he's got a real burst. I think that's what I look at, just instincts, you know, and I think the instincts probably have somewhat to do with natural just ability, but then reps playing that position at whatever age, I think makes a difference. So yeah, I mean, he's definitely a candidate for us to have back there.
Coulter, do you have anything?
Yeah, Coach, a couple from me. First of all, there's always a broad narrative around replacing great quarterbacks, and you've got through this, whether it was whoever came after Brock Jensen or whoever came after Carson Wentz. It seems like so much of it is that guy being himself, though. So, I mean, what do you think of that scenario, particularly when it comes to Eastern Washington? Because this guy's not Eric Berrier, but he can't be either, right?
That's a great point. Yes, he's got to become the best version of himself. And as a coaching staff and as a team, kind of figuring out what that is, that's challenging sometimes, because I think you've had a guy like they have for so many years, everything you do is kind of modeled around his ability, right? And your success their success was so dependent on the plays he made. In replacing him, the easiest thing is to say, okay, if we can replace him with something that's as similar as possible, that's the best thing, and that puts a lot of pressure on that person to try to play the way the previous person did, as opposed to how he can play now. There's similarities between them, so it's not this complete departure. He's not this 6'5" guy, statue back there or anything like that, so it's not that drastic of a change. But yeah, I think it's, from my experience, that next person has to be the best version of himself, and to that measure, I think the guys around him have to realize that and probably raise their game up too, and that's challenging. I've lived through that on a couple occasions.
It seems like watching it back from Saturday, that the offensive line performed pretty well, actually, that they got pretty good push. So how do you hope to carry that momentum, and do you feel like that test was good for their confidence as they continue to evolve as a unit?
Yeah, I think 3 games in and taking a big picture look at it, I think our offensive line has played well. I think they're maturing, and that game on Saturday was hard for them to have a real impact. In particular, the way that stretch of the stretch of series went, when we had the one play interception and we returned the kick. It's 21-14. They come back, and we just to really establish anything. I mean, and get behind them was hard. But when they were, what they were asked to do, I thought they performed well. And I think, it was our hope that at somewhere during the season, I think we would say that, hey, we have a better offensive line than we previously did. And I don't know if we could quite say that yet, but I think we're getting there. In the week in, week out test within our conference, we'll play that. We'll play out, or allow that to play out, I guess. And no, I think they're playing with the right amount of confidence. I think they're communicating. I think they're still on edge, knowing that there's guys behind them that could be put in. We should get Titan Fleischman back, I think, next week. Titan went down that very first night. We played McNeese, so it's a group that's coming along, and that's what we needed and we expected, and I've liked their progress.
You have several guys defensively too that have played a lot, but are sort of still coming into leadership roles, like Callahan. I know Talcott's been a leader for a little while, but guys that are older now and they don't have Troy Anderson and Daniel Hardy and Devontae Williams to look to. So what have you thought of those guys grow these first couple weeks here in the season?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think a game like Saturday tests that way more than the previous 2 Saturdays, and and it might not even be in the moment on Saturday night, but it's the moments that occur through this week. When you see something, say something. I think that's always the hardest thing for an emerging leader, is feeling comfortable when things aren't going quite the way you think they should. Should I say something, or should I just swallow it? And I think we need guys to keep learning how to do that, and I think we have guys that are capable of doing it. I think Ty and Callahan in particular. Up front, we really don't have an old guy per se. I mean, Kyle Riggs the oldest, but he's not out there. I think Brody, I think is one in particular that's got to keep stepping up, even though he's fairly young. Additionally, I think in the secondary, I do think we need guys to keep emerging there too. But I think that's a fair assessment that we're still trying to probably find our way, find our voice a little bit on defense.
And the corners, they went up against. I thought that Oregon State group was very talented. There's really good receivers there. Is there a carryover there too? Just because I know Eastern has really good receivers as well. They'll see good receivers in the Big Sky, but probably not going to have as much team speed collectively as what you saw on Saturday. Is there a carryover there?
I think that does prepare us. I thought we played a little passive. We didn't. No ball got behind us, but a lot of balls got in front of us. So we got to find that line of being able to play a little bit more aggressive out there. And I think we have guys that are capable of it. Certainly part of the plan going into a game against a team like Oregon State is to make them go the long, hard way and not give up big plays, because they had big play capability at wide receiver, and they had shown that. So, the flip side is you make them go the long, hard way, and they do. They make plays over and over again on 3rd down, and so I think we got to find that balance. But I do think having a game like that to maybe measure that will help us move forward.
And you guys won there last year, and there's so much made of Montana State and Montana's home field advantage, but Eastern has a great home field advantage as well. They've lost very few times on that red field since they went to the red, 2010. So does it give you an element of confidence going there, knowing that you made this trip before?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are like, why do we have to go there back to back? And understanding the new scheduling in the Big Sky, you can explain that pretty simply. They're an every year opponent for us. Your every year opponents have to be split home and away. So we go back there. We were able to go in there last year and play well enough to win that game. And that game took offense, defense, special teams. It took all 3 phases. So I do think there's a level of confidence. I always think there's It's helpful when guys have played in a venue, so a venue isn't brand new to them. And I think a lot has been made about the red turf, but they've been as consistent a program as there's been in our league, through that stretch. So it's the turf is one thing, but their team's been really good for quite some time now, and they've had consistency and continuity in the coaching staff. Coach Best following up Coach Baldwin, and Coach Best haven't been on that staff before. So I think we have to go in and play well. I think our familiarity with them as a team, having played them last year, later in the year, and playing down that field, I think will definitely help us. But it's not gonna win us the game.
And the last thing for me, on that note, they have had such a consistent identity, and everybody always talks about the quarterbacks, the receivers, and the offense. But I've always thought they've always had a very complementary defense with great team speed, especially in the secondary. Do you see that still, and how would you just evaluate Eastern's defense overall?
Well, I thought they made some strides last year for sure, and the speed being the component that probably stood out the most, and I think they definitely have some active guys up front. So no, I think they lost some guys, but I think they've replaced them with comparable players. I think the two games we have, I think Tennessee State was a pretty athletic outfit on offense, made some plays against them. Ultimately, they were able to pull that game out, and then I think we're all aware of what Oregon's capable of offensively, and that game got away from them. So I think that's the challenging part, is new faces, probably not this great body of work to judge, knowing that we anticipate they're going to be a much improved team from both of those first two games. I think we got to anticipate that. But no, I think defensively they've been built around speed, and they continue to have it.